Hello and welcome to another of PAVE's weekly virtual discussions. My name is Ed Niedermeyer. I am the Communications Director here at PAVE, which is the Partners for Automated Vehicle Education. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today. We have a really fascinating and I think quite important topic to discuss today, which is really a part of public education that oftentimes is not first in mind, but can be an amazingly effective tool, particularly at reaching people who might not, be online looking for information about AVs already, and that is museums. I think everyone has childhood memories of going to museums and learning cool things, and it's so important, I think, to public education that AVs be a part of that. So to discuss this, two actually exhibits recently that were just sort of centered on autonomous vehicle technology. We have guests, including Rebecca Posner. She is from, she's the Behavioral and Research Lead at the Center for Connected Autonomous Vehicles in the UK. Rebecca, welcome.
Hi, great to be here.
And from Ford Motor Company's product development operation, we have Lucinda Yuen. Lucinda, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so both of you were involved in putting together and participating in museum exhibits. Rebecca, and we do have a few slides to share with you for this. So Rebecca, why don't we start with you and ask you to just describe the exhibit that you were involved in, maybe how you got involved, where it was, and I will show some of the images that you've provided to accompany you as you explain.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me. So our event that took part in the Science Museum in London, which is located in central London, and we're very lucky that a lot of the museums are free to attend. So the Science Museum has a range of different areas and permanent exhibitions, but like many other museums, they often have temporary exhibitions on a specific topic that will run for a specific but quite extended period of time. So generally, these are spread over the ground floor of the Science Museum. You can see a couple of images there, which was kind of what the exhibit looked like. So we have quite a lot of vehicles involved in there. And on the last Wednesday of every month, it runs what's called Air Late, which is effectively when the museum stays open until 10 p.m. for more in-depth exhibitions. And one of the great strengths of the Science Museum, if anybody's been lucky enough to go to Science Museum in London, is its ability to create very visual and incredibly interactive stands and exhibits. So it will include lots of interactive screens, as you can see in the photos there, as well as include lots of the technology in the vehicles themselves for people to walk around and see, and occasionally even sit in and trial. So for our exhibit, we were actually approached by the Science Museum, who were putting on a temporary exhibition with the support of a range of different organizations and industries who work across the field of autonomy. And they were looking for our support in one of those late night events, as I said, and for us to be present at some of those events to engage with members of the public. And one of the benefits from those evenings is the opportunity to add additional stands to the normal exhibit. So including interactive ones, and I think it's one of the next images, the next slide. Yeah, no, next one after that. Thank you.
There we go.
So that one there, to add interactive exhibits like that one here, and a chance to have more in-depth discussions beyond the information that is just presented in the exhibit, as well as for members of the public to ask questions and have discussions. So when we were asked, we obviously jumped on the opportunity because we would be looking for an opportunity to engage with members of the public in a slightly more informal setting and gain insight into their current perceptions. But also we were really interested in learning what they were learning through the exhibit and what they were when they thought about it, and how they saw what they saw the challenges and the opportunities of autonomous vehicles to be for the future. So yeah, that's a little bit about the exhibit in itself.
All right. Thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and leave this open for a moment, the screen share. Lucinda, why don't you tell us a little bit about the exhibit that you were involved in, and then we'll sort of get into a little more of the nitty-gritty.
Thank you, Ed. So our exhibit is at the Michigan Science Center, which is located in Detroit, Michigan. Michigan Science Center, or MySci, serves the Southeast Michigan area. It also has a traveling science program using a Ford Transit van to try to reach more rural communities or schools that can't afford to go to the museum. Next slide, please. We, together with Michigan Science Center, developed, I use the word, a futuristic AV exhibit. And in a nutshell, this is it. So it's a kid life-size autonomous vehicle. In the front, the kids can actually stand there, wave their hands, and under the two things that look like headlamps or eyes, or the eyes of the vehicle, is an interactive live LiDAR simulation. So you can see yourself in a point cloud image, not a normal TV image. Then you can go inside the car, and it's kind of a futuristic vision where on the inside, there's no steering wheel, there's no accelerator pedal or brake pedals. You can see what the car sees through the, quote, windshield. There's also a selfie station. And then now that we've kind of captured your attention, you can go to the back of the vehicle and learn about how a self-driving vehicle may work. So how we got inspired to do this was, there's two important commitments Ford Motor Company has. One is to educate the public on AV technology, but also we are committed to helping accelerate STEM education in children. So this was just a really nice union of those two commitments together into this one project.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll put that down for a second. Rebecca, it was, first of all, it's fascinating that it seems like both of these exhibits were really trying to reach sort of very, very different audiences. Did you have a specific audience in mind that you thought or knew that you would be reaching, and sort of how did that sort of influence what you did to contribute?
So the event for us was really trying to move away from just engaging with transport innovators, technology enthusiasts, or early adopters, which is quite often the audiences that we very easily attract or are aware of the new technologies and maybe aware of some of the projects that we fund or run in the UK. The Science Museum is a family museum, and as I said, it's free. So it attracts a wide range of guests from all ages, backgrounds, and interests. And our aim was really to reach and engage with an audience who may have never heard, seen, or used the CAV, including young people. So lates often are only open to adults over the age of 18, but throughout the rest of the exhibit, for the permanent exhibit, it's open to absolutely everyone. There's quite a lot of school trips that go to the Science Museum, and so on. So the event was actually part, as I said, was part of a wider exhibit, which was originally for 15 months and has been extended for a further 5 months. So it's actually running until next January now. And so our focus, was really to move away from that more traditional type of adults that we would normally engage with in these sort of more techie events, or to discuss such techie subjects, and actually look to engage in a completely different way with an audience that we've never really had an opportunity to engage with fully. So yeah, that was kind of really what we were trying to do.
And just what how did you have to change your message? How did you think about that transition, execute that transition? What was that like?
So the exhibit in itself had a couple of key takeaways it was really aiming to focus on, which was really showing how many of these technologies already exist and to demonstrate how diverse autonomous vehicles are, and breaking away this narrative that it's just a sort of traditional private car that is moving towards autonomy. And also show how the deployment of these technologies could really shape our future habits and our future behavior. So the exhibit went beyond just looking at including road vehicles, it also included air and water. So in the UK, we had a quite a famous competition a couple of years ago, which was to name the first autonomous boat. I don't know if you've heard of this, which is now called the David Attenborough, but it was originally named by the public Boaty McBoatface. And they've effectively used, there's a part of that ship that is fully autonomous, and that has been called Boaty McBoatface, and that was included in the exhibit. So there was a bit of humor included, as you can tell, in terms of the exhibits. But as I said beforehand, one of the real strengths of the Science Museum and the team of curators there is their ability to have really interactive stands. And so they had a lot of stands which were sort of tactile, in terms of you could go and trial different things and you could plan different things. They had a full range of technologies, from autonomous pods to sensors, including drones, and as I said, boats. And so what they really focused on, and what we really tried to focus on, was to have things that were for individuals to go and actually sit in, to experience, to see what they were like, to be around their technology. And as soon as they did that, the questions kind of came flooding. So our job was actually made a lot easier from that sense. But we tried to stay away from including too much technical specification, going down the really technical route of how things work, and actually tried to demonstrate what things look like and how they could be used. And that's how we started to tackle that quite such a complex topic as autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, no, and I think that transition to addressing a more general public about such a complex topic is something that we at PAVE are really interested in, and that's just such a cool example. Lucinda, I mean, you sort of, that challenge was almost to a whole other level, because it seems like this is the exhibit that you worked on was really sort of emphasizing sort of a technical understanding to some extent, but even more than that, this was for kids, right? I just can't wait to hear what does it take to teach kids about how autonomous vehicles and autonomous systems work?
Well, very similar concepts to what Rebecca said, and it's funny how we arrived at the same conclusions. So we were targeting mainly grade school kids, and as Rebecca said, we never spoke before, but we weren't trying to teach them the rocket science behind AV vehicles. And the analogy I'll use is we're just trying to introduce them to AV technologies, AV vehicles, just the concept, so they had some familiarity within themselves. So the next time they saw it, it's really not as scary. So the analogy I used earlier with Ed and Rebecca was, taught the fourth grader exponentials. That's a scary word. When we first said exponentials, he was like, whoa, it's so scary, so hard, I can't do it. And I never really taught him that, but I knew he had to learn it in the 5th grade. So by the time 5th grade rolled around, he knew the word, he kind of knew how to do it, he learned it easier. So we were just trying to introduce the concept of, hey, a vehicle can drive itself, kind of show how it works. And we wanted to do it in a cool and fun way, because at the museum, there's lots of competing displays there, and there's a real short attention span. So we intentionally decided we could use a real AV vehicle, but it looks a little maybe boring to kids, maybe a little scary with all those cylinders on top of the vehicle. So we chose to create a futuristic vehicle, cool, fun, non-intimidating. So they would have they're attracted to it, they have some familiarity and some level of acceptance. So in the future, the next time we meet together, it won't be as scary.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm going to go ahead and have you discuss sort of your next slide, because I think it's really fast. It's on the same sort of question of how do you make this complicated things comprehensible to kids. And I love, this is actually something that's come up in our own discussions at PAVE before. And I love that you use this human body analogy. Tell us about this and sort of how you got to this and what it's trying to do.
So we were just a small group of volunteers from Ford. So we had very techie engineers on the team that could tell you all the details, but the normal person wouldn't understand that. So we used this human analogy. Instead of going into algorithms and bounding boxes, we just said, okay, we use the human analogy. We see with our eyes. Self-driving vehicles, see with sensors or something called LiDAR. What is a LiDAR? Okay, let's go to the front of the vehicle, and then you can wave your hands and see yourself as the vehicle sees you. We make decisions with our brains. Do I stop? Do I go? Self-driving vehicles use a computer and algorithms to do this. And you can go to the back of the car to see how it does it. It draws bounding boxes, it decides. So we use this concept to help something they know, their own body, in order to translate what a self-driving vehicle is trying to do.
Yeah, I love that, and in part because one thing that I've noticed as I've personally learned more about autonomous technology, I actually start to think about how my own brain works in terms of what I know about how an autonomous system works. So like sort of the perception, prediction, planning kind of workflow. I constantly see that, and so that is it's really fascinating. And what better way to explain an autonomous system than your body, right? It's something that everyone, it's very relatable, right? Rebecca, what kind of resources did you draw on when you were sort of preparing for this? And yeah, what's out there that people might be able to look to help do something like this?
So we're quite lucky, and this I think touches upon on the point that Lucinda said, is that we're quite lucky in the UK that we have a lot of homegrown talent and innovation. And one of the things that we were quite keen on, I think it's something that Lucinda touched upon really well, was moving away from what may be seen as quite normal and potentially boring. So we included some of the tech that we included in there was we kind of wanted to include a bit of a history of CAVs, to be able to understand how we got to where we are today. So we included a 1960s Citroen, which was the first. It's called the first sort of autonomous vehicle that, when it was a guided private car that drove on one of the UK motorways. And there's quite a famous video of it where you've got someone in the back seat, sort of got in the front driver's seat, he's got their hands up. And so we included that. We included the world's first self-driving electric racing car, again, to try and get people's attention. And we also included one of our pods, which was one of the ones that has actually been used in CCAV-funded projects and run on UK roads, including at Heathrow Airport, which is one of the major airports in London, that's been used in Greenwich in public trials. So people would have seen them before and maybe didn't even realise that they were autonomous. So when we came to resources, we really drew on the expertise that we were lucky to have, both from projects that we funded and the experience within our team, but more importantly, the industries that are present in the UK. And the exhibit was supported by quite a few organisations, including MathWorks, Direct Line Group, PwC, and Samsung. They were all involved in this sort of setup of this. And then on top of that, they were quite lucky that there was a lot of the industry who were really willing to show their tech. So there were some of the Starship pods that were there, so the little ones that are doing on the curb deliveries. We had the Citroen, we had the pods, and so on. So in that sense, we didn't necessarily, we were hoping to draw more directly in terms of our events and having academics present with it on the stand. But we had the Institute of Robotics with us as well, so we had it was really good, because in that sense we had sort of all our bases covered for when people came to talk to us. So on the day, what we really aimed to do was, we had quite a lot of people who came directly to talk to us, and we really encouraged them to go and actually walk around the exhibit and then come back and talk to us for the questions, because the organisations that had been involved had put so much time and effort in terms of really focusing the technology was there and really getting people's curiosity going. And then by the time they came back to us, it was just a really, really fascinating and easy job to do, to just sit there and have really fun conversations with people about all the tech that they'd seen and so on. So a slightly different approach to obviously Lucinda, but with the same baseline principle of trying to get people's curiosity going.
Yeah, no, and that having, experts sort of present after you, a lot of times, we'll ask people, what are your questions? What do you want to know about autonomous vehicles? And, there's some that sort of everybody are aware of and stuff, but a lot of times people don't know enough about the subject to even know what questions to ask. And I think everyone can relate to that experience of coming out of a museum exhibit and just being in love with whatever that topic is, if only for that day, right? And what better time to reach someone and answer the questions that they have, having sort of already seen all this kind of thing. And actually, Rebecca, it occurs to me that a lot of our audience is American, most of it, or North American certainly. We may not all know what CCAV is. I probably should have asked you at this beginning.
Yeah, sorry, that's my fault. It's the Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles. So we're very lucky in the UK that part of the Department for Transport, so one of our government bodies, and the Department for Business, Energy, Industry and Strategy has created a joint governmental team, which is called the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles, and we're responsible for effectively supporting innovation in the UK, legislation, and effectively working towards having safe, accessible, and more sort of productive CAV industry within the UK. So yes, that's us.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And Lucinda, so obviously you're with Ford Motor Company. I'm sure you have a lot of work internally that you can draw on. But what other sort of what were some of the resources that specifically went into this exhibit?
The resources we mainly used from Ford was to actually develop the exhibit itself. So we had, so there were 5 of us total. We were volunteers. We just wanted to do this to give back to the community. So we had designers who actually designed this cube, electronics experts that actually did all the interactions, the front LiDAR display, the video at the back. So we basically designed this from, scratch to the beginning. But in terms of the learning aspect, that's something that we didn't really have a lot of wheelbase in. So we leaned on Michigan Science Center's learning chief. She's the one that kind of understands displays, how kids learn in terms of a museum environment. We leaned on her for that aspect because that's not our wheelbase. And then we approached this in terms of how we would approach designing a vehicle. We would go meet with the customer, really understand how they use the product. So we went to the Science Center during busy times and really just observed. And most of us had kids, so we kind of understand how kids work in general. So the main concepts we learned from being at the museum in situ, observing, that we took and put into the display is there's lots of competing exhibits there. So if it looks fun, they'll go to it. If it looks a little boring or too technical, they won't even go to it. There's hundreds of displays there. So that's why we used, we made our own fun looking vehicle instead of using a real LiDAR looking vehicle. And as Rebecca said, in this day and age, it has to be interactive or static, or you will not keep their attention span. It wants to be modern. They know what an iPad is. They love using iPads. So if there's an iPad there, they'll use it versus anything else. So we intentionally use iPads in this display as the medium. They were a lot more interested in a display that they could be a part of. So getting into the display versus just working with the display. This is why we made this a kid-size, life-size vehicle. The last part that attracts the most attention is everyone loves looking at themselves in the mirror or on a video. So we definitely wanted to implement that part. So these are all the concepts we observed and put it into the display.
It's fascinating. It seems like aspects of this are similar almost in a way to regular product development work that you do on cars, potentially, in terms of going and seeing people actually using the products and trying to understand sort of what are those key things that you need to understand, right? And that the product needs to have to be successful. So Rebecca, so what was, and I actually, what sort of jumped out as the most sort of memorable thing for attendees from what you saw?
So I think that the main thing, and I think this is very similar to what Lucinda has been saying, but I think that what stood out was the ability to be able to see such a range of technologies. And we were incredibly lucky that the Science Museum, the exhibit was on the ground floor of the Science Museum. So it was the first thing they saw as they came in. And so that was one of the things that really stood out was the ability to have so much technology there and also the ability to talk to industry. And I think this goes back to the point that you were saying, Ed, that quite often people have a lot of questions and they sort of the ability to ask people those questions and to know that they were going to get an answer or to have a really quite in-depth discussion about a brand new topic was something that really stood out. And we had included feedback cards so that we could effectively, as the aim of the exhibit was, much broader than just trying to get people to understand the technology, was also for us to see what people's reactions were to AVs, what they learned from the exhibit, what they saw the opportunities and also the challenges of AVs. And I think the ability to really reflect in the immediate after they've been able to experience that tech and sit in that tech and so on was really, really beneficial. We were also really lucky that we put our stand right next to what is a fully autonomous pod, and very similar to what Lucinda was saying, the ability to sit inside and have a conversation, I think for people was something that was really quite memorable for them.
Yeah. And, when PAVE did our survey, sort of public perceptions and opinion survey, which is actually something I'll be speaking to one of your colleagues at CCAV about soon. But it was really challenging that question of what is even informing people's answers to this, right? Because if people, and we saw this correlation between knowledge levels and acceptance. And so if the people who aren't accepting it don't know anything about it, well, what are the things that they're using to basically, it's very hard. And so having that combination of education that doesn't really feel like education, it's going to a museum, but you are learning, and then being able to sort of take that. And I think the other piece you mentioned, right? How there's so many aspects of this. It's impossible to predict, you know, what is it about AVs that people are going to want to know? And so there's no substitute for that human, you know, expert there who can answer those questions, right?
Absolutely. And I think we also, from the exhibit, it's also really shaped what CCAV, for what we've decided to do in the future in terms of our future research programs. It helped us to understand what areas of priority in terms of public engagement and behaviour research needed to be. So it was also a memorable event for people who attended, but for us, it was also a really quite memorable night.
Yeah. And Lucinda, I want to ask you about sort of the most memorable moments for the children who were at your exhibit.
So I want to say that the most memorable moment was they learned all about AV and they could repeat it, but I think it goes back to something a little bit more fundamental where everyone just loved seeing themselves in a different way. So you could wave yourself, so seeing themselves as a point cloud on the vehicle. And then two, along the same theme, inside, I didn't really realize that this would have such a big impact, but everyone just raved about the ability to take a selfie, you know, and send it to yourself and post it on social media. We did this to more create a lasting memory, because you can go to the museum. Sometimes you'll remember something you see, sometimes you don't. But if you have a selfie sent to yourself, you kind of have that lasting memory that I went to the Michigan Science Center and I took a picture in a Ford vehicle and I have a picture to remember this AV vehicle. So that was more for us to give a lasting memory, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sorry, Rebecca, did you create any supplemental materials? And actually, you know, one of the things that I was really intrigued by, and I'm going to try and see if I can pull it back up real quick. But it's okay. Here we go. Here, this thing. So explain this to me. You referenced it earlier. I mean, I think I describe what we're seeing here and sort of what were you getting out of this?
So we had a couple of, as I said, one of the things that we created was one of the benefits we can bring additional stands, bring additional things to the stand, to the exhibit itself. And so this was something that the Royal Academy of Engineering had supported us with in when they helped us. And it was like, the main question was life in the fast lane or a dead end. And we had a couple of questions on there, which was around the biggest opportunities, your biggest fears, and the who is responsible for safety, and so on. And we also had about how excited people felt about, you know, the prospect of driverless cars. And so what we did was we got people to come and effectively pin where they were, but the different colors represent whether or not they were a frequent driver, an infrequent driver, or didn't drive at all. So it allowed us to see how those perceptions change slightly across different types of road users, especially drivers and those who may or may not be more frequently around sort of vehicles. And it was really good fun. We didn't have the best photos of these, but I really wanted to include them because it was quite a visual thing. It also attracted people to it because they were like, oh, what's going on there? And the fact that they could leave something that was lasting, I hadn't really thought of it in the same way, but when you said it, Lucinda, it sort of stuck with me that they were putting their mark on something that was then sort of being taken away. So that was one of the really exciting things. And the other thing that we did was, obviously, we had these feedback cards, as I mentioned earlier. And that was really for us to sort of take away what their experiences. And we've used that quite a lot in terms of shaping our research going forward. But we did wish we'd done more. That is one of the main takeaways for us. Was one of the things that people kept coming back to us for was, where do we get more information about what's being done, what's happening about AVs, which for us was ideal because that kind of curiosity is what you want after such an exhibit. And so that was one of the key messages that we took away, was we wish we'd done more for people to take away with them, that could have provided them with resources or guided them as to where they could get more information or updates and so on. But that was a really good part, really fun bit of the exhibit.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, I mean, the fact that just as AV, you know, autonomous technology is still in very early phases and companies in it are having to make up the playbook as they go along. This is equally true for those of us in AV education. And I think these kinds of opportunities to not just teach people, but to understand how to be effective at teaching and understand, you know, so have that be a two-way street. I think it's phenomenal. And yeah, and I think there's, you know, probably always wish you could do more. I mean, it's one of those topics where you could always know more, you can always understand it better. So, well, we are just about out of time. So I'd just like to briefly ask each of you, and Lucinda, we'll start with you, sort of what was sort of the most important thing you learned, or what kind of advice would you give to someone who was thinking about being involved in an exhibit like this or making one happen?
Well, I think what's really important is whoever your target audience is to understand how they learn what you're trying to do in order to develop the display. The one thing I do want to point out right now is I wish we had collaborated with Rebecca before, because one important element that she did in her display was get feedback on where to go next, and that isn't a part of our display in terms of what people should learn next. So that's something I'm going to write down as a big opportunity. Yeah.
See, we're all learning all the time. Rebecca, how about yourself?
I think I'll second what Lucinda said, but what was really stood out for us was how this kind of engagement, and that is educational, but more importantly interactive, is really welcomed, and people really wanted to see more of it and to be involved in the development process. And I think what really, and this is something that Tara said to me a while back, Tara from with your team, that said to me about shaping the narrative and ensuring that future users have the information to start understanding truly what the technology is and where it is and how it will be used. And I think this is something that Lucinda touched upon, is around STEM and bringing children along and young people along with the technology. So for us, it's all about building trust in the vehicles through knowledge and education. And I think I'll definitely be in touch with Lucinda to get a few tips out of the engagement with young people, because I think what was done there is really outstanding. So yeah, the main success for us was genuinely the level of enthusiasm for this sort of exhibit.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so excited about both of these exhibits. I'm really glad that they are both ongoing. I was a little worried that Rebecca, yours had wrapped up by the time we did this, but it turns out it's extended to January. If you are in London or in the UK, definitely go check it out. It looks amazing. And of course, Lucinda, the one in the Michigan Science Center, that will be continuing for quite a while now still, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we really encourage people to go check these exhibits out. And also, if this inspired you at all to, again, whether it's sponsoring or developing or whatever, to make exhibits like this happen, that's fantastic. And we're so excited. That's what we're trying to do here. And feel free to get in touch with us at PAVE. We'd love to help out however we can in those efforts, or connect you with people who can. So with that, I would like to thank our guests for taking the time to be here and sharing this really cool, really exciting, sort of frontline work in public education about autonomous vehicles. Rebecca Posner of CCAV UK, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been brilliant.
And Lucinda Yuen from Ford Motor Company, thanks so much.
And thank you. The pleasure was all mine.
And thanks for tuning in. We have more fascinating discussions here every week. So we hope that you will continue to come and share with us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one.